lot of people have been writing into us asking how they can help. Can they volunteer? What can they do? I know yesterday at this point the Red Cross was saying that they were right for actual volunteers. They were looking more to recruit professionally trained counsellors, so they actually didn't need more people on the ground, but certainly clothes. And they said to me the best thing you can do is to donate money to the Premier's Fund. So that will go into the areas that are specifically needed, because obviously that's the Aussie spirit, isn't it? Everybody around the country saying, what can we do? That at this point in time is the best thing. We can also turn our attention to northern New South Wales, because we must bear in mind that there is also a flood situation there. The State Emergency Service has ordered the evacuation of 2 towns. So let's check in. Greg Newton is from the SES. He joins us now. Greg, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Significant flooding in Grafton this morning. Just run us through the situation there and how bad that is.
The flood peak in Grafton passed through the main part of town last night. It's currently at about 7.46 metres and falling. However, we still have evacuation orders in place for some of the smaller communities downstream at Elmara and Bushgrove. We're also closely monitoring the situation at Maclean and down at Yamba. Yamba's isolated with the roads in that area cut by flooding. Maclean, the water is close to the safe height that we've got on the levee. But we don't expect it to see that. We've got exceed that, and we've got every confidence in the situation in there passing without incident at this stage.
All right, so you're saying that it probably is already starting to recede in some of those spots, Maclean particular?
In Grafton, it has the peak has passed, as well as Elmara, which is slightly downstream of Grafton. Maclean, we're looking at the peak round about now, and then we should start to see the water levels drop in those areas.
Okay, Boggabilla, what's the latest there?
Boggabilla, we're continuing with the evacuation of Boggabilla, hoping to have the population of that town out to Moree by 2 o'clock this afternoon. We still have a number of people left in town, and we'll be working with them to evacuate them in the course of the day, either with their own transport or transport that we're arranging for them.
All right, any other areas in New South Wales that are of particular concern that you're keeping an eye on?
Overnight there's been a severe weather warning in the west of the state, and we are keeping an eye on towns like Broken Hill, just for that potential of flash flooding that could come as a result of heavy downfalls. Also, we have volunteers working in various places, such as along the Darling River, where we still have major flood peaks moving down through communities there, and up in the small communities of Gadooga in particular, right up in the north of the state, which is currently isolated as a result of flooding from the rivers there coming out of the St George area in Queensland.
Have you got enough manpower? Do we need, is there anything that we can supply from around the rest of the country in areas that aren't needing them at the moment? Obviously Queensland is all hands on deck here, but is there anything you need?
Look, at this stage we've got about 200 volunteers in the field providing an array of support to their communities, and New South Wales SES is currently finalising the arrangements to deploy a task force of 20 volunteers up to assist in Queensland. So from a workforce requirement, I think we're quite well placed with our volunteers at this time. If community members are interested in supporting their volunteer organisations in their own community in the SES, that they should, once things quieten down a little, approach their SES unit for information, and perhaps they could join in and become a member of the organisation and contribute in future.
Wow, I'll tell you what, they'd be pretty proud if they made it to do that. You guys are doing an incredible job. Greg Newton, thank you very much and all the very best.
Thank you.
Yeah, Koshi, you can't believe it. So much focus on what's happening here in Queensland, and then you've got to consider northern New South Wales. What they're going through is horrendous.
Yep, and Mel, we're just in breaking news. The Brisbane River is starting to recede. Now, the Brisbane River peaked at 4 a.m. Brisbane time this morning at 4.45 metres. Now, that's a bit below what authorities are expecting, and so almost a metre below what the peak was during the 1974 flood. So, news just to hand, the Brisbane River is now starting to recede. indeed. Well, of course, Queensland's flood crisis will severely strain a lot of the state's infrastructure, and at the forefront is the health system, with many residents injured or sick from dirty floodwater. Dr. Jenny Mansberg joins us now, Sunrise GP. Jenny, morning to you.
Good morning.
Look, I'm looking at the colour of the Brisbane River here. It is a shocking brown. Just how dirty do these floodwaters become?
And I've heard, Grant discussing the horrible smell of it and looking at all the oil on it. And he's right. We do have some sewage overflowing in many areas in Queensland. Plus, if, all the cars that have been swept up, oil leaking, all sorts of chemicals leaking into it, I think you should assume that this is seriously dirty, unhealthy water.
Yeah. Look, I've seen a guy on a jet ski out here this morning, just crazy stuff. We've seen residents literally swimming out of their homes. What are the health risks for people entering the water?
Well, for those really fast-flowing rivers, of course, they can be swept away, which is really scary. I mean, that's how people die. So you just don't want to be walking or wading unnecessarily through any water because it can be much faster than you think. The other one, of course, is the water is dirty, and so it does carry the risk of infections, mainly to your skin, your eyes, ears and nose, throat, that sort of thing. We're unlikely to get massive outbreaks of diarrhoea, unlike Pakistan, just because it's generally a bit healthier here. But, of course, there are other problems as well you need to worry about in the long term, whether you're going to have mosquitoes really breeding like we saw in India. When they had all of their flooding, we've got outbreaks of dengue fever, which is at the moment mainly up in Cairns, but we can get Ross River fever as well. That is a problem, and the infrastructure is going to have to work on that for a long time. And of course, for everyone who's lost their power, the stuff in their fridge and freezer is a little bit dodgy, so they can get sick from drinking the tap water and also from eating the dodgy food that's gone off in their fridge.
OK, so don't drink the tap water? Is that what you're saying?
What Queensland Health is advising at the moment is that you run the tap water, let it sit for a little bit so you can see the sediment go to the bottom. What's left, the clearer water, pour that into a pot. Boil that for about 3 minutes if you can, if you've got electricity or gas available to do that for you. And then you can store that, actually, pour a whole lot into a jug and store that, and you can drink that. If you don't have that available, you can use bleach, just household bleach. It's kind of a 4%, 4 parts bleach to the rest, 96 parts water, or even pool chlorine, if that's all you've got. It's actually safe to drink.
Oh, wow. OK, great advice there. Jenny, thanks for that.
Good luck.
Now here's Mel.
Thank you very much, Koshi. We're just watching, we think it was a police officer, we're assuming, on a jet ski charging up the river, keeping an eye on things. So I'll find out for you what's happening there. But look, it's just gone 6 o'clock here, local time in Brisbane. Obviously different time zones around the country, given there is daylight saving in some markets. But we are live right across Australia to bring you all the very latest details this morning. Another special extended edition of Sunrise. And if you have just tuned in to join us, of course, you would have seen Koshi is back from holidays. And a good bit of news on the Brisbane River this morning. It's just, I feel like jumping up and down and going woohoo, but I know that there's still a lot of danger at hand.
Yeah, absolutely. The river, as we've been saying, has peaked to under 5 metres, 4.45 metres, and the river is receding, authorities are saying now. It peaked well below the original predictions and below the 1974 record, but the scenes today are absolutely devastating for this city because it came in under the record. Don't think for a moment that it lessens some of the danger and some of the damage, a lot of the damage here to this city. We'll find out what all that means very shortly, but for now, Sam has all the latest from the newsroom.
Thank you, Koshi. Good morning again, everyone. Now, first to the very latest on the flood situation. The Brisbane River has reached its peak this morning at 4.45 metres before 5:30 local time. Now, that's a metre below the 1974 record level. 4,000 people are in evacuation centres, but that number is rising. It's expected 36,000 homes will be flooded. 110,000 homes and businesses are now without power. Now, these are some of the latest pictures of the Brisbane River this morning. A long stretch of debris lies along the edge of the river as groups of people gather to have a look at the destruction. A tugboat is still working to control a 200-metre chunk of the famous river walk that has broken off overnight. It's slowly floating down the river. That should be 2 tugboats working there, and the Gateway Bridge has now reopened. Brisbane residents are waking up to the scenes of devastation this morning, with floodwaters engulfing tens of thousands of homes. Some residents forced to evacuate yesterday have left behind a lifetime of treasured memories.
We tried to get it as high as we could, so we put a lot of things on top of wardrobes, a lot of things on top of the kitchen cupboards. We had a few tears yesterday thinking about all of the stuff that we had to leave behind.
While the flood peak is lower than 1974, the devastation is likely to be greater in this flood given Brisbane's bigger population now. The Brisbane Lord Mayor Campbell Newman spent part of last night with residents camped out at the main evacuation centres. He says while it was a rough night, morale was high.
Well, it seems pretty good to me, as much as it can be in these circumstances. The big thing is how soon can we get people back into their homes and where they were accommodated. So that's the very big question, and ultimately there will need to be a better solution than this temporary sort of centre, but I'll leave the experts to work that one out for us in the coming few days.
The stories of those who've died in the floods are starting to be told this morning. 13-year-old Jordan Rice couldn't swim. His father has described how his son asked rescuers to save his little brother Blake first as his family clung to their car when the torrential water tore through Toowoomba. By the time they returned for Jordan, he and his mother Donna had been swept away. And 25-year-old childcare worker Josh Ross was caring for his disabled mother in Grantham when the flood hit. Now, the confirmed death toll now stands at 12. Police are still investigating the discovery of a 13th body in a car in Ipswich. The latest from Queensland Police is that 62 people are still missing. There are grave fears for 12 of those people. The damage bill for Queensland's flood crisis is expected to run into the billions of dollars. It's predicted the state's coal and wheat exports will be severely hit, but Premier Anna Bligh is confident Queensland's economy will recover.
We accept that for many there's a long, slow road, but getting our economy back and ticking quickly is one of the first priorities of the task force that is already working on recovery.
The Reserve Bank expects growth could be cut by 1% because of the floods.